Well, holy shit. But seriously, I wasn't expecting this to go anywhere when I came back 5 months ago, so the fact that I even got to grab this many of you to watch me means the world. Thank you so very much for watching. Now that that's out of my system, let's get back to the scheduled nautical spookiness. Do you ever get a feeling of uneasiness? Not like existential dread or anything, though after the last 5 years, I don't blame you. No, I'm talking about just the uneasy feeling you get when things are just a little bit off. Not so much that it makes you feel like something is wrong immediately, but that there's just enough weird stuff that has you going, wait, what on earth is happening here? That's the feeling that I overwhelmingly get while I've been playing Dredge, the subject of this week's video. Developed by Black Salt Games and published by Team 17, who've built themselves something of a pretty great indie publishing catalog. Dredge is a Lovecraftian-themed fishing, exploration, and puzzle game, but without any of the more questionable aspects of Lovecraft stories. Like a style of written prose that's so stiff, repetitive, and technical that calling it boring would be an insult to the concept of boredom. Also, all the racism in Lovecraft's writing that was considered too much for the time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Dredge was, according to critics and players alike last year, really fucking good. And based on the time I've put into it, I'm inclined to agree. Plus, it's outside of my wheelhouse mechanically speaking, so I'm going to be giving it a go on that alone. So let's gas up the boat and bust out the sea shanties. It's time to talk about Dredge. Taking place in an unnamed archipelago in the 1940s, Dredge has you playing as an unnamed fisherman who crashes his boat off the coast of the island town of Greater Marrow. He's then found by the residents of the town, who give him a new ship to be their local contract fisherman. No strings attached. And from there, you just do your thing as a fisherman. After a while, you run into this mysterious-looking scholar dude, and he tasks you with finding a bunch of artifacts in the different regions, and that's when it started to slowly hit me with the Lovecraft. And I find the first one, and it's no big deal. Then I get to the second biome and do a quest to get a family crest for this old dude to have him move across to another island. Sure, I can do that. That's when I get my first glimpse of a goddamn sea serpent. It's becoming increasingly clear that something is going on in the archipelago, but you don't get it all at once. Dredge slowly feeds it to you as you do more and more of the game's pursuits, which is the in-game terminology for quest lines. And this is just one way that the events unfold. You also talk to an eclectic cast of characters, and they all have this weird look to them, and they tell you more about the archipelago, which led to me realizing that the writing in Dredge is incredibly smart. It conveys as much information as possible in as few words as possible. It feels like I'm talking to a bunch of people who lived on these islands and have been so thoroughly terrorized by these creatures that they've more or less adjusted to them. They just go, oh, and don't stay out after dark. That's when Ognagoth the Flesh Ripper comes out, and he prefers human flesh. And I'm just here going, wait, what do you mean there's a sea monster called Ognagoth the Flesh Ripper? And that's not even getting into how, as you learn more about what's going on, the more you see actual fucked up shit, and finding messages in bottles and lost journal entries that showcase a particular chain of events that are, for lack of a better term, an apocalyptic log. For those not familiar with the term, an apocalyptic log is usually a diary entry or video log from someone who's dead and is used as foreshadowing in horror games. These start to paint the story of an expedition that's gone wrong, and as a result, something got out. And it's looking like the cause of the weird happenings in the area. These all add up to make an atmosphere and tone that is incredibly disquieting. I'm always sailing around feeling like I'm being watched, most likely because I probably am. The game's aesthetics go hand in hand with this as well. Its low poly art style for the open world and models, and a 2D art style giving me heavy Mike Mignola vibes at points. They contribute to the feeling that everything is just a little bit off, and while I know it feels like I'm repeating myself, I feel like I need to hammer that home. A lot of this comes down to the fact that I can't do slow release horror very well. I'm blessed and cursed, blurst if you will, with a very vivid imagination, and I just think of horrifying fates that are most likely worse than anything Dredge could come up with. And on that front, I say, well played, video game. Well played. But that art style being a bit on the lower key side also works to the benefits of the many fish and sea creatures as well. And to talk more about how those tones and feelings of dread are conveyed, I need to get into the gameplay mechanics. Dredge is primarily a sailing and fishing game, not a fishing management game, just fishing. I say this because it's an important modifier for expectations, because the fishing in Dredge is very simple. It usually consists of timed mini-games where you need to press the action button on timed green areas to get the fish to come up faster. And there's a weird meditative quality to it until you get your hands on an aberration variant of a fish while fishing and go, sweet merciful mother of God, what is that thing? In terror, and then you go to the fishmonger and he pays extra for the fish and you proceed to tolerate and even welcome their existence. And that's just what happens in the daytime. You have the option of going out and doing some nighttime fishing as well. And you kinda need to do that at times because some parts of the main story can only be done at night. This is where Dredge really comes out to play. Hang on, let me get some appropriate music going. Oh no. This is when you start getting some of the more weirder fish species, and when the aforementioned sea monsters come out to play. Let me paint you a scene. I'm out late one night, getting some fishing in, and I see another boat, and I think, another boat? At this hour? I think I'll get closer. You know, like a guy with a death wish. And then I see multiple lights come on. Okay, weird, trying to get more visibility, I respect that. That's what I noticed. Those aren't eyes, that's not a boat, that's an anglerfish monster that's pretending to be a boat, and it chased me into a rock. I managed to escape it, but holy shit, that was terrifying. I can still feel my spine tingling and my skin crawling just thinking about it. It also doesn't help that this is where the panic meter was kicking into overdrive. Do you see that eye under my clock? You're not being watched. That's your panic meter. It's kind of like the insight mechanic in Bloodborne, where the higher it is, the more fucked up shit you can perceive. When this happens, get the fuck back to a port and rest until morning. Doing this resets the day back to sunrise and calms you down. I treat going out at night like going to the doctor. Preferably when you need to and not a second more. Because while I don't have thalassophobia, I don't like the ocean because in real life, that shit is 95% unexplored last I checked, and all the fish in there are fucking eldritch sea monsters. But a lot of this would be way harder to manage if the controls on your boat weren't smooth as butter. You can just get into this nice calm of drifting anywhere you need to go in any of the 5 biomes in the succinct open world. What I love about this is that the size of it means that there are islands with distinct landmarks. The most obvious among them is the lighthouse attached to Greater Marrow. It serves as a nice beacon to get home because that's technically your base of operations. I say technically because while that is where the shipwright for upgrading your boat and fishing equipment and the fishmonger for selling fish are, other merchants in the different parts of the isles can help with that stuff. Eventually, you get into this rhythm of waking up, sailing around to fish and dredge up materials for upgrades, and getting yourself ready to tackle specific challenges and not get eaten at the same time. And while the upgrade costs can get a little absurd at times, it does provide a nice mechanical goal to strive towards. Dredge's use of its mechanics to portray the slow burn of a cosmic horror story shakes out in a way that feels fantastic. Between managing your boat, making enough money, and gathering enough materials for upgrades to take on bigger quests, going into dangerous waters to complete said quests, and doing all of this while trying not to become some big nasty monster's dinner, You get a great feeling of uneasiness and dread that just washes over you like the ocean coming in at low tide. Dredge is currently my go-to example of slow burn horror in video games. Between its creepy atmosphere, mechanical conveyance of dread, and smart writing, it's an experience that's perfect for this, the spookiest time of year. Or any time of year, really. Hell, I think if I played it when it came out, Dredge would have been one of my favorites of that year. And that's saying something because it came out in 2023, a year that gave us Baldur's Gate 3, Hi-Fi Rush, Turbo Overkill, and other bangers. If you're looking for some nautical terror this spooky season, I highly recommend it. If you've watched to the end, thank you very much for doing so, and don't forget to like and subscribe. We still have 2 more weeks of spooky season, and next week, we're going to be talking about my favorite horror game. Or at least a remake of it. Safe tidings and Halloween!